In the heart of Kansas, nestled among sprawling wheat fields and sleepy towns, was the ominous Oakwood Cemetery. This ancient burial ground had always been steeped in an unsettling atmosphere, a place where whispers of the past echoed with chilling resonance. Among the town's quiet inhabitants, one family was the center of whispered rumors and suspicious glances. The Jenkins were a brood shrouded in mystery, their daily visits to the cemetery at twilight giving the townsfolk ample fodder for gossip. Rumors circulated around the small town, whispers of unholy rituals and midnight gatherings, but no one could have fathomed the truth that was about to unfold. On a day that started like any other, young Sam, a vivacious 10-year-old known for his boundless energy and playful mischief, broke free from his mother during a visit to their deceased uncle's gravesite. Wandering amidst the sprawling gravestones and age-worn statues, Sam discovered a chilling sight. Hidden behind a copse of gnarled trees, the Jenkins family was in the process of burying bodies in an unmarked grave. His heart pounded in his chest as he witnessed the ghastly scene. His presence did not go unnoticed. One of the Jenkins men spotted him, their cold gaze locking onto the terrified boy. Panic surged through Sam, causing him to scream and bolt, the chilling echo of the man's voice as he gave chase ringing in his ears. The incident triggered a series of tormenting events in Sam's life. Despite his pleas and accusations, the law enforcement was slow to act, and the Jenkins' reign of terror over the young boy continued. Their veiled threats and intimidating encounters seeped into Sam's life, making his childhood years a living nightmare. However, justice finally caught up with the Jenkins. The horrifying truth of their deeds was uncovered, leading to their arrest. But one managed to slip through the cracks. The daughter, who was not a resident of the town, escaped the grip of the law. A decade slipped away, and Sam was now a young man of 20 years. He attempted to shrug off the shackles of his past, to move beyond the terrors that once haunted his dreams. But the past has a way of clawing back. A stranger named Amanda reached out to him on Facebook. Their conversations were innocent at first, leading to an unexpected bond and attraction. They decided to meet. Amanda was lovely and charming, but something about her was unsettling. Throughout their date, her demeanor changed, her words took on a sinister tone. Conversations twisted into tales of death and vengeance, making Sam's blood run cold. As the night drew to a close, Amanda attacked him. A scuffle ensued, but Sam managed to escape, his survival instincts kicking in. He reported the incident, and Amanda was swiftly arrested. Under questioning, she revealed her true identity. She was the elusive Jenkins' daughter who had avoided capture a decade ago, and she had sought revenge on Sam. The chilling truth had finally surfaced. Sam had survived the malicious intent of the Jenkins family once, and he had triumphantly done it again. The seemingly sweet girl who had come into his life was in reality a vengeful specter from his past. The quiet town of Oakwood was once again abuzz with the tale of Sam and his unyielding spirit. Despite the ghost of his past re-emerging, Sam's courage prevailed. His terrifying ordeal became a beacon of hope for the townsfolk, a testament to human resilience. Sam's life was forever scarred by the horrifying experiences of his past, but he did not let that define him. He channeled his experiences into something positive, working as a counselor for victims of crime, ensuring no one felt alone in their darkest hours. His tale, although harrowing, serves as a stark reminder of the power of the human spirit, and the extraordinary courage it takes to face our fears and rise above them. There's something particularly unsettling about the Salem Cemetery in Massachusetts. Every tombstone, every mausoleum seems to echo the voices of those who have passed, creating an atmosphere that oscillates between the mysterious and the terrifying. This is the story of two friends, Luke and Mark, and the night that forever changed their view of the world. Luke was a passionate lover of ghost stories and the paranormal. He was fascinated by urban legends and mysteries. Mark, on the other hand, was skeptical. He did not believe in anything that could not be explained by science or logic. Despite this fundamental difference, they had been best friends since childhood and often spent their free time together discussing these issues. One October evening, Luke convinced Mark to visit the Salem Cemetery. He was convinced that if there was a place where they could experience the paranormal, it would be this cemetery, steeped in history and legends of witchcraft. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a spirit of adventure, the two friends ventured into the cemetery on a chilly autumn night. Luke was thrilled at the idea of capturing paranormal activity, while Mark followed him reluctantly, more interested in debunking his friend's theories than meeting real ghosts. They explored the cemetery for hours. Luke took random photos, hoping to capture an image of a ghost, while Mark scrutinized every corner with a flashlight, trying to find a logical explanation for every suspicious sound or shadow. They were about to give up, tired and frozen, when Luke noticed a flickering light coming from an old mausoleum. Despite Mark's protests, he decided to get closer to investigate. When they reached the mausoleum, the light disappeared. Luke, however, was not discouraged and decided to take some photos. As he did, both felt a chilling breeze, despite the calm, windless night. Luke felt a shiver of excitement, while Mark tried to ignore the feeling of discomfort invading him. Then, out of nowhere, a female voice echoed. It was a lament, a barely audible whisper, but they both heard it. Luke seemed electrified by the experience, while Mark tried to find a logical explanation. They decided to investigate further. As they approached the mausoleum, the stone door creaked open. Inside, there was only darkness. Suddenly, an ethereal figure appeared, a woman dressed in 17th century clothing. She looked around confusedly, as if she was lost. Luke was ecstatic. Mark, on the other hand, was terrified. There was no logical explanation for what they were seeing. The figure looked at the two friends, then disappeared. That night, Luke and Mark left the cemetery without uttering a word. When they finally spoke, Mark had to admit that there was something he could not explain. Luke, on the other hand, was euphoric. He had proof that ghosts existed. From that day, their friendship changed. It wasn't worse, but it was different. They had experienced something incredible together, something that had challenged their deepest beliefs. Mark was no longer the skeptic he once was, and Luke had confirmation that the world was much more mysterious than it might seem. Excited and still shaken from the experience, Mark decided to share the story with his mother. As soon as he walked into the house, he rushed to tell her what he had experienced with Luke. He described the flickering light, the cold breeze, the ethereal figure. The enthusiasm was palpable in his voice, even though he was clearly still scared. Mark's mother listened in silence, her face indecipherable. When Mark finished, she remained silent for a long moment, then said, "You know, Mark, your great-grandmother is buried in that cemetery." Mark was speechless. He knew almost nothing about his great-grandmother. He only knew that she had died young, long before he was born. "I knew she was buried there, but I never thought that." Mark's voice trailed off. He couldn't finish the sentence. Was it possible that the figure he had seen was his great-grandmother? There was no way to know for sure, but the idea fascinated and frightened him at the same time. His mother was incredulous. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she knew Mark well enough to know he wouldn't make up such a story. There was a concern in her eyes. "You shouldn't go back there, Mark," she said, but she knew her words would make no difference. Mark looked at his mother, then nodded slowly. "I know, Mom. But I have to know. I have to find out if it was her." From that day on, Mark has not been the same. His experience in the Salem cemetery has changed his view of the world. Despite his mother's concerns, he is determined to return to the cemetery and discover the truth. He may never be sure, but he has sworn to search until he has exhausted all possibilities. The small town of Harrowsville, Ohio, is one of those places where spooky stories bloom like flowers in the fields. Suspended between legend and reality, the town's inhabitants share tales of ghosts and paranormal phenomena with reverent respect. This is the story of Thomas, a local man whose fate was marked by an event as tragic as it was unexplainable. Thomas was a middle-aged man, highly respected in the community. He was known for his kind heart and kindness. When his mother died, the pain that struck him was palpable. She was the only family he had left, and her loss devastated him. Thomas's mother had been buried in the local cemetery, an ancient place filled with stories. In the months following her death, Thomas became obsessed with the idea of reopening his mother's tomb. He said he heard her voice, asking him to free her. Despite the community's pleas to let her rest in peace, Thomas was unmoved. One night, he decided to act. Armed with a shovel and determination, he headed towards the cemetery under the cloak of a moonless night. There were no witnesses to what happened that night, only the silent shadows of the tombs and the cold wind whispering among the old trees. The following morning, Thomas was found dead, lying on his mother's grave. The shovel was still gripped in his hand, the tomb untouched. There were no signs of violence on his body, nor any explanation for his sudden death. The autopsy revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Thomas was a healthy man, he had no heart problems or other diseases. His death remained a mystery, an unexplainable tragedy that struck the Harrowsville community. The news spread quickly in the town, and soon rumors began to circulate. Some suggested that Thomas had seen his mother's ghost that night and had died of heartbreak. Others said he had been punished for trying to disturb his mother's eternal rest. There was no way to know what had really happened that night. His mother's tomb remained intact, and the only person who could have provided answers was dead. Over the years, the story of Thomas has become a legend in the town. The elders tell his story to the young, a warning about the respect for the dead and the mystery surrounding life after death. Harrowsville Cemetery has become a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts, all attracted by the story of Thomas and the mystery of his death. Thomas's grave, next to his mother's, has become a symbol of mystery and terror. Some claim to have seen a shadow next to the grave on moonless nights, a shadow that seems to look at the grave with sadness and remorse. Thomas's death remains one of Harrowsville's most unsettling mysteries. Despite investigations and theories, there's no definitive explanation for what happened that night. As rumors continue to circulate and legends continue to bloom, the only certainty is that something extraordinary and terrifying happened that night in Harrowsville Cemetery. Thomas wanted to reopen his mother's tomb, seeking answers that perhaps only the dead can give. Instead, he himself became an unanswered question, a story to tell on dark nights, a warning about the mystery of death and the respect due to the deceased. No matter what the truth is, the story of Thomas remains a testament to the dark and inscrutable side of human experience, a reminder of how thin the line is between life and death, between the real and the unreal. And in a small town like Harrowsville, where spooky stories are currency, Thomas's story continues to live on, an enigma awaiting an answer that may never come. Over the centuries, cemeteries have been the backdrop of eerie and horrifying stories. One of the most renowned is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois, known for its spine-chilling legends. One such tale concerns Amelia Blackwood, a young doctor with an insatiable love for archaeology and history. On October 22, 2023, she decided to visit Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, a place shrouded in a fog of mystery and ghost stories. Amelia had spent her entire life studying history and archaeology, but she was particularly fascinated by cemeteries. Each tombstone, she thought, represented a unique story, a piece of the past lost in time. But it was not just the history of Bachelor's Grove that had attracted her, it was also the stories of apparitions and paranormal activity. Armed with a camera, a flashlight, and a notebook to document her findings, Amelia arrived at the cemetery in the late afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. But despite the beauty of the twilight, a sense of unease permeated the air. Amelia began her investigation by examining the tombstones. Many of the names had been weathered by time, making it difficult to read the inscriptions. But one tombstone in particular caught her eye, that of a certain Walter Harold, a man who, according to legend, had disappeared in the cemetery itself in 1881 and whose spirit still wandered the cemetery. It was dark when Amelia decided to take a break. As she sat on an old stone bench, she saw a blurry figure in the distance. It looked like a man, dressed in 19th century clothes. Her heart began to pound. She picked up her camera and took a picture. When she lowered the camera, the man had disappeared. She felt a chill run down her spine. She wasn't sure what she had seen, but she felt a sense of unease. She decided to head back to her car, when she heard a whisper in her ear. "Don't leave," said a male voice. Amelia spun around, but there was no one there. She felt a wave of fear, but decided to investigate further. She picked up the flashlight and began to search for the source of the voice. After several minutes of searching, the flashlight beam fell on an open grave. The tombstone bore the name Walter Harold. Amelia's heart started to beat even faster. She approached the grave, shining the flashlight inside. Inside, there was only a dark and deep void. A sudden gust of wind caused her to drop the flashlight into the grave. As she leaned over to retrieve it, she felt a cold hand grab her arm. She screamed and pulled away, falling backward. When she looked at the grave again, it was closed and her flashlight was gone. Amelia ran towards the cemetery exit, her eyes wide with terror. As soon as she reached her car, she looked back and saw the figure of the man she had photographed. It was Walter Harold, staring at her with empty and sad eyes. Amelia left, but that night she could not sleep. The images of the cemetery and Walter Harold continued to haunt her. In the following days, she became obsessed with her experience. She decided to do research on Walter Harold, hoping to find an explanation for what she had experienced. She discovered that Walter Harold was a wealthy merchant who had mysteriously disappeared in 1881. He was never found, and his grave was dug in case his body was ever found. Amelia's story, a chilling cautionary tale, went down in history as another spooky chapter in the legend of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. The sun was setting over the picturesque evergreen cemetery, in the heart of the quaint town of Ravenwood. The golden light reflected off the gravestones, creating a solemn and mysterious atmosphere. But that evening, something extraordinary happened among those tombs. This was the story of Eleanor, an elderly woman whose heart was broken by the recent loss of her husband, James. Eleanor had heard of a medium, a mysterious woman with the power to communicate with spirits. Desperate to be reunited with her beloved husband, she decided to seek her out, hoping to bring him back to life. On a foggy and cold night, Eleanor arrived at Evergreen Cemetery accompanied by the medium. The sky was illuminated only by the moon, creating a magical and eerie ambience. Together, they approached James's grave, where his body rested in peace. The medium began uttering arcane words, incantations that hung in the air. Eleanor was enveloped in a mix of hope and fear. But when the words faded into the darkness, nothing happened. James did not return to life. The spell had failed, but something had awakened in Eleanor. From that moment on, she began to feel watched, shadows seemed to lengthen in her direction, and she felt a persistent cold that penetrated her bones. Her mind was tormented by strange visions, while spirits seemed to dance around her, invisible and intangible. Eleanor's health rapidly deteriorated. She suffered from insomnia, recurring nightmares, and sudden bouts of anxiety. Despite visits to doctors and medical tests, no medical explanation could be found for her symptoms. It was as if her torment had a supernatural origin. Months of anguish passed for Eleanor. She would wake up screaming every night, terrified by her visions and the specters that seemed to draw closer and closer. Her appearance changed, her face marked by terror and sleep deprivation. She was burdened by an invisible weight, a presence that followed her wherever she went. Finally, approximately 6 months after the failed ritual, Eleanor passed away, her body exhausted from the torment she had endured. Death seemed like a liberation, an escape from the prison of her nightmares. Intrigued by Eleanor's mysterious death, the investigators called upon the medium to testify. She was the only person who could shed light on what had truly happened that night in the cemetery. The medium told the truth. Eleanor had been warned about the risks she was taking with the ritual, but despite everything, she had insisted on attempting to bring James back to life. The medium had cautioned that disturbing the eternal sleep of the departed could have unforeseen consequences. But Eleanor, driven by desperation and her deep love for her husband, had decided to take the risk in order to embrace him once more. The medium was released by the authorities, but Eleanor's words continued to echo in her mind. She had done what Eleanor wanted, but at what cost? She wondered if she could have done something different, if she should have protected Eleanor from herself. The story of Eleanor and her desperate attempt to be reunited with her deceased husband became a legend in the town of Ravenwood. It served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the potential consequences when one meddles with the eternal rest of the departed.